During World War II, the Japanese executed or brutally tortured a large number of captured Allied soldiers. The horrific Chichijima tragedy, which happened on the little island of Chichijima about 600 miles away from Japan, was one of the most terrifying stories that were ever told. The US chose to launch bombing raids over an island rather than launch a full-scale invasion. According to sources, perhaps than 100 airmen were shot down, and the Japanese managed to capture at least 20 of them. Only one of the 9 airmen who were shot down during a raid in 1944, the future American President George H.W. Bush, made it out alive. The 8 other captured airmen who were with him were in for a terrible end. All might were put to death, but 4 were butchered so that the Japanese officer could eat them. The species of the crimes were not made public until James Bradley 2004 book's Flyboys, a story of true courage despite the fact that Japanese officials were later found guilty of murder and preventing dignified burial. This passage from the book explains how the horrible tragedy of the Allied prisoner of war who were cannibalized was described. James Bradley described multiple incidents of Japanese captured cannibalizing Allied prisoner of war in his book Flyboys, a true story of courage. According to author, this involved not just ritual cannibalism of the livers of recently deceased prisoners, but also the sustained cannibalism of Allied prisoners over a period of days, amputating limbs only when necessary to maintain the freshness of the meat. Mark Martian, Floyd Hall, Jimmy Dye, and Warren Ulrich were the individuals that perished as a result of his heinous act. The Japanese army and navy commanders on the island engaged in cannibalism, according to Bradley's book, not only to prove the Americans who was in charge, but also for the purported physical and spiritual benefits, as the expert explains. General Yoshio Tazimana and Rear Admiral Kuninjo Mori were 2 notable participants in the acts of cannibalism. The flesh from their thigh and their livers were presented as delicacies after 4 American airmen were executed with the intention of being partially digested. The guilty officer on Chichijima practiced cannibalism for supposed physical and spiritual benefits as well as to further demonstrate their power over their captives and retaliation for American airstrikes. Reports state that all other enlisted airmen were freed within 8 years, despite the fact that 13 Japanese troops were charged with war crimes at a trial held in 1947, and that 4 officers were hanged for their crimes.